Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It's Thursday, October 9th, and we got a huge Week 7 on slate. We got a couple of huge games, 3 ranked matchups that we're going to get to. We're going to start with the two main ones. We got Alabama going up to Missouri for a huge SEC matchup. We also got Indiana at Oregon for a massive one over in the Big Ten that will absolutely decide some of the CFP spots at the end of the year. Then we got some Week 7 picks. We got different stuff. We got the Red River Shootout. We got Ohio State, Illinois, the other ranked matchup of the week. The Deep South oldest rivalry, Georgia at Auburn, Michigan, USC, a huge one out there in LA that will possibly decide who's that fourth team from the Big Ten at the end of the year. Then we got a little bit of a whip around. We'll talk about UNC in the drama around Bill Belichick right now. We'll get into a massive Group of 5 matchup on Friday night and a couple other big-time matchups, including A&M and Florida, a massive one that could confirm Florida as what we saw last week, could show that might have just been a one-off performance against Texas. And then we'll finish it off doing my best bets of the weekend, a number of ones that I feel pretty good about. I think it's going to be a weird weekend, so hard to feel too confident, but at the end of the day, feel pretty solid about the picks that I have at the end of the show. But let's go ahead and jump into this. We got two big games as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, Ohio State, Illinois is going to be really fun, but these two, in my mind at the very least, are a cut above, I suppose. And we'll start with Alabama at Missouri. This one goes on at noon. It is going to be Alabama minus about 2.5, 3.5, somewhere around there pretty much all week. Over under at 51.5. This one's going to be really awesome, and it's not something you're used to. Alabama going to Missouri for a top 15 matchup and one of the biggest games of the entire weekend doesn't usually happen, or at least hasn't in the past. And Missouri is officially back to being a really solid program. I think they're 26 of the last 25, or 26. They've won 26 of the last 31 games, under Eli Drinkwitz, and this team might be as good as any he's had. The run game is as good as you're going to find in the entire country, rushing for over 300 yards. You got Beau Pribula playing really confident football. The question becomes, what does that look like if they can't run the ball as effectively? Now, Alabama does rank 70th in the country in rush yards given up per game. That being said, still the best rush defense that Missouri's played. So they have not faced anyone that's really been all that great at stopping the run. Maybe they won't in this game, but it does seem like Alabama's kind of finding their footing in that respect. They did a great job of taking Diego Pavia away last week. Obviously, if Beau Pribula can hold on to the football when he's running, that's going to help a ton here. But at the end of the day, I do think there's an opening here where Alabama's going to bring a little bit more physicality than any team that Missouri's played thus far. Obviously, South Carolina is a great test for them, but I do think there's going to be a little bit more of a leg up, and especially in the back end of this defense, has a lot more playmakers, a lot more guys that can come downhill, make some plays in the run game. So can Missouri get that going? Can they kind of set the pace of this game? Because if they can't, Alabama could hypothetically kind of run away with this thing. But Kevin Coleman, Marquise Johnson, Brady Norfleet, they're going to be massive in this game, not because you have to take attention off the run game. I think you're going to be able to run the football okay one way or the other, but you're going to have to make a couple of big plays in this game. If you don't get a team that's as talented, as physical as Alabama to respect the pass game at least a little bit, you're going to have a problem. There's no doubt about that. And I do think it's one of those games where they've played a lot of really good teams. They haven't necessarily played that great team yet, and Alabama is going to be a massive step up for this Missouri team. And then Alabama and Ty Simpson have been as good as you're going to find in the entire country right now. They're 5th in the country in pass yards per game, but Ty Simpson has 1 pick on the year, looks confident as all get out, and he's one of those guys that I think is not going to stop. He's super efficient, really smart with his feet, always where he needs to be, and rips the ball really confidently. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think he's going to continue to play really good football. Tend to believe he's going to be a first-round pick by the time April rolls around, but that's a discussion for a different day. The big-time question here is Ty Simpson's been incredible. He's also had time to throw, which is the biggest question here. Zion Young and Damon Wilson sit at number 2 and number 3 in the FBS when it comes to pressure rate, and you're going up against two tackles that, while very talented, did struggle early in the season against a Florida State team that has a couple of athletes on the edge and has some dudes on the inside that can really get pushed. So has the offensive line for Alabama kind of found it? Have they found a groove? Are they locked in the way they want to? Obviously, they're still kind of playing around with the 5 that they want out there, have had some injuries to guys like Jaden Roberts that have forced guys like Michael Carroll, the freshman, into a starting position, played incredibly last week. Is he going to be asked to do that again is still relatively up for debate. And this offensive line for Alabama, they got to find a way to win. If they do win, I think there's openings on this Missouri back end. I think there's a number of things that other teams weren't able to do against Missouri because they were giving up so much pressure, or they didn't have a guy like Lenore Sellers for a team like South Carolina. I think there's going to be an opening. If you can hold off these guys just enough, if you can keep this pass rush just at bay, it doesn't have to necessarily be you're dominating them all game, you're rushing for 6.5 yards per game, and Ty Simpson has all the time in the world to throw the ball. It's just got to be enough. You got to be able to hold off Zion Young, hold off Damon Wilson, and just let him make enough plays. You know he's going to make the plays. You know his eyes are going to be in the right spot, and he's going to be able to put the football essentially wherever he wants. But if you can't get after him, it's going to be a long day for the Missouri offense or defense. If Missouri can get after him, this Alabama offense could struggle a lot more than we even thought they were capable of going into this game. There is a lot of different things that they have not necessarily been forced to do because Georgia can't really get after the passer as talented as they are. Vanderbilt couldn't really get after the passer. Missouri absolutely can, and that's going to be the big time question here. How quickly can they get after this team, and can Alabama find a way to hold them off at least enough in this football game? But it's going to be a really fun one. There's no doubt about that. I think the keys to the game are really interesting because you have one of the best pass offenses against one of the best run offenses in the entire country. When you have Missouri, they are really good against the run. They're really good running the football. Can they control the pace of this game, or do you let Alabama's pass offense get going? Because then they could win this game by 14 or 21. It could get really ugly really quickly if you let Ty Simpson get into a groove. Now, if you can control the pace with Ahmad Hardy, with Jamal Roberts, and allow those guys to be the special players that they absolutely are, then you have an opening here. Then you have a place here where you can really do some damage, and Missouri can be the team that's kind of setting the pace. They're always up 7. They're always up 10. They're making Alabama kind of play from behind, and then your defense just has to make one play. It really does define what this game is going to be, and that kind of goes into my second one. Those early drives of the football game. Who wins the first quarter? Is Alabama able to get going with Ty Simpson? Is Missouri able to get a little bit of push on the offensive line? Is Zion Young and Damon Wilson able to get after Ty Simpson early on in this football game? Because I do think that kind of sets what this football game is going to end up being. Alabama has not really been put behind except for in that Florida State game, and it looked a little erratic at times when they were forced into a corner, when they were asked to continuously make plays to come back in that football game. Didn't necessarily go their direction. So can Missouri put the pressure on them early and kind of start fast and put a little bit of onus on the Alabama offense to make some plays through the air, because then they can kind of sit back in coverage and hopefully jump on one of these footballs for Ty Simpson and totally change the game in a moment. And then the Missouri pass offense is massive in this game. It has been good, and I think the question is it good without the run defense or a run offense, or is it good because of the run offense that Missouri has? I tend to lean towards the second one. Now, I do think they have playmakers on the outside. I think Kevin Coleman's going to be a huge player. I think Marquise Johnson is massive for this team. Brady Norfleet's been as good of a tight end as you're going to find in the country thus far. But I think it's going to be one of those things where if Missouri can't make one or two big plays through the air in the first quarter and a half of this football game, I think it's going to be really, really tough to get that offense going the way that you want it to. I do think it's going to be relatively hard to stop either of these offenses. For both these defenses, I think they're good. I don't think they're all the way where they need to be quite yet, and I do think there's going to be a little bit of offense in this game. I can't get it out of my head that Ty Simpson makes enough plays. I think Alabama wins this one 30-27. I think it is as fun of game as you can possibly get. I think Missouri is going to gain a lot of respect in the people that actually watch this game and actually take it in. I think it's going to be a really, really fun one, but I just think Ty Simpson's playing on another level. I think Alabama offensive line is going to do enough. I think those tackles are plenty better than the ones that Missouri has faced thus far. I think there's going to be enough opening here for Alabama to win this game by a little bit. I think it's going to be a fight, and Alabama rolls into Tennessee next week with a lot of confidence, but also a lot of work to do still. But I think it's going to be a huge game. I think Alabama barely gets it done over Missouri on the road. Then you got number 7, Indiana, at number 3, Oregon. Another game that you probably wouldn't have bet 5 years ago was going to be one of the games of the week, maybe the game of the week. But Oregon's favored by 7.5 in this game, over under at 55.5. It's a 3:30 kickoff on CBS. This one's going to be really, really fun. And it's one of those games that I think is getting overlooked because of what Indiana did against an Ohio State or a Notre Dame last year. And I get it to a certain extent. I totally understand that approach, and all these coaches have that talk around them. You know, if you can't beat a top 10 team, you're no good, and you're never going to beat a top 10 team. But there's a moment here where Indiana can break through, and Oregon played really good football. There's no doubt about that. But they played a Penn State team that has proven to kind of have a little bit more holes than they thought they were going to. And Indiana probably saw some things in that fourth quarter against Penn State where they're thinking, maybe we can exploit that. Maybe we can go over the top like they did to Devontae Ross to kind of blow that game open for Penn State. They can do that with Omar Cooper. There's no doubt about that. And I think there's going to be an opening in this game where if Indiana's offense can get going, it's going to be really hard to stop Fernando Mendoza and company. Now, for that to happen, they have to run the football. There's nothing Indiana does that does not predicate off the run, whether it's Roman Hemby, Kalen Black, Kobe Martin, all of these guys have to play a huge role. The offensive line's got to play a whole lot better. Now, I think they've been good thus far this season. I think they did a good amount of stuff against Illinois, against Iowa, but this is going to be a different challenge. These are absolute freaks on the other side. And Mateo Uyunglele, Bear Alexander, all of these freaks on the defensive line for Oregon, it's going to be really hard to hang with them. Now, you're going to have to find a way to open up running lanes, because if the run game can't get going, Fernando Mendoza is going to have a tough time in this game, because Tosh Lupoy is going to be able to drop guys in the coverage and make life a little bit tough for the really talented quarterback that can make a name for himself in this football game. I think Indiana this season can just do more offensively. I don't think they were necessarily limited last season with Curtis Rourke, but I think the running ability of Fernando Mendoza is massive. I think his ability to throw off platform is something that's going to be huge in this game, and you have a wide receiver group that continues to get better. Elijah Surratt, Omar Cooper, all of these guys are uniquely elite and can do some really incredible things even against a team like Oregon. And I think you test that back end just a little bit more, because I don't know how much it's really been tested. Until that fourth quarter against Penn State, there wasn't really anyone that was pushing the ball downfield or really testing this defense. Maybe Indiana is the team that can do it with Fernando Mendoza, but the quarterback battle is the biggest talking point. There's no doubt about it. These two quarterbacks have been as efficient as you're going to find in the entire country thus far. They both only have one INT on the season. Both of them are really, I don't want to say really new, but relatively new to what the Big Ten means, what these matchups mean. And it's another top 10 matchup for a guy like Dante Moore. It's another massive matchup for a guy like Fernando Mendoza. And I think it's fair to say one guy's going to get their Heisman campaign kind of shot into the stratosphere on Saturday night. The question is, who is it going to be? Bryant Haynes is the defensive coordinator for Indiana. He's done an incredible job with this team. This will be the toughest test they've faced since Ohio State last year. Feel very confident in that. Lewis Moore and D'Angelo Pons are absolutely massive on the back end. Amari Farrell has had INTs in back-to-back games. There's an opening here. Indiana has an opening to get after Dante Moore just a little bit, force a couple of mistakes where he's not comfortable making them, and then you're put in a position where you're kind of playing with house money. You have a quarterback that's a little bit more flustered than he thought he would be coming into this game. Maybe Michael Kamara is getting after him just a little bit, and then you're looking at up at the scoreboard at the end of the third quarter, and it's tied, and you just need to make one play down the stretch of this football game. I think Indiana has all the ability in the world to do it. Both these quarterbacks completing over 73% of their passes, both only have one INT. I think there's a moment here where which DC can put the other quarterback in just a tough spot first. Who can force that hand first? Who can force that one errant pass, that one aggression where you don't really need it? There is an opening here for one of those football teams. Now, can it be Brian Haynes? Can it be Tosh Lupoy that kind of wins that battle against these two quarterbacks that have been really, really hard to stop thus far? That's plain and simple. I do think the toughest challenge that they're going to face this year thus far is on the other side of the football, and I don't think Oregon was expecting that. I think they were expecting it to be before the bye week, not after the bye week, but this Indiana team's playing better football than Penn State, plain and simple, and they have a lot of talent as well. It's not necessarily they're losing a ton of talent to a Penn State team, or they're losing a little bit of talent to Oregon, but at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of juice in this Indiana program. I think they've heard a lot of the noise. I think they're going to come out really ready to go. Can Indiana hold off Mateo Uyunglele and company and kind of give Fernando Mendoza a little bit of time to dissect this defense? Kind of the same thing on the other side. Which offensive line can hold up just a little bit? The Oregon offensive line looked great against Penn State. This might be a tougher challenge, weirdly enough, against Bryant Haynes in this defense. But the keys to the game for me are as simple as, can Indiana get after Dante Moore? That's a uniquely talented kid that can do so many incredible things in the pocket and outside the pocket. But Michael Kamara, Tyreek Tucker, all of these guys that can make those plays, that have been able to make those plays throughout this year and can push guys off the spot, can make guys uncomfortable. We saw it against Luke Altmaier in Illinois, but I think this is an opening. I think you have to get after Dante Moore. If you don't, we've seen what happens. He can absolutely pick you apart, and he absolutely will in this game if you give him a little bit of time. Fernando Mendoza's legs is a huge thing to me in this game. I think Oregon's defensive line has an advantage over Indiana's offensive line. I don't know how big that's going to be until we kind of get this game underway, but I think there's going to have to be a huge off-schedule plays from Fernando Mendoza in this game, whether it's a 3rd and 10 where he escapes and runs for 11 yards, or he finds his way out of the pocket after a blown blocking assignment and hits a guy downfield for even 5 or 10 yards or maybe 15. There's going to be an opening here where he's going to have to make plays off schedule because this defensive line's too good not to get home a couple of times. So there's going to be a moment where Fernando Mendoza is forced to make a throw on the run or is forced to make a play with his legs. He's got to be able to make it. And then finally, Curt Cignetti. He's been in this moment a couple of times. Against Ohio State and Notre Dame last year, I don't want to say he cowered away from the moment. I don't think they put on the best performance they could have in those 2 games. I don't think they really played to win as much as they could have late in those football games. And now you're walking into a team that will bury you if you give them the opportunity. That's plain and simple. That has been obvious since Dan Lanning has took over. I don't think Curt Cignetti has talked any trash this week, so there's no worry about crazy Dan Lanning coming out, although that kind of comes with him to every single football game. But at the end of the day, I think there's a moment here where Curt Cignetti can change how he's talked about. He can change how Indiana's talked about, and he can change what this season looks like for the Hoosiers, where it's no longer, they're in a schedule where they're not going to play up to the big-time opponents, but they're going to be able to make some plays against the smaller teams. They're now one of the teams that can compete in the highest level against an Oregon, against an Ohio State, and possibly go to the Big Ten title, possibly go back to the CFP, and then who knows what happens from there. But I think this is going to be a really fun game. I think it's going to go back and forth. I think Indiana is going to earn a little bit more respect than they did maybe last year in these moments. I think Oregon finds a way to make it look a little bit better than it ends up being. I think Indiana loses this one 24-34. I think Oregon probably scores a touchdown, maybe about 3 or 4 minutes left in this game. Makes it look a little bit wider than it was really throughout the game, but I do think Oregon's able to win this one. I think they have a killer instinct that cannot be denied. I think Dante Moore's ability to kind of just keep his heartbeat steady throughout these games is something that is impossible to quantify, especially with these young quarterbacks. And I think there's going to be a moment here where Oregon just looks a little bit cut above Indiana. Not necessarily by a ton. I think Indiana will earn some respect on Saturday, but I think there's a moment here where Oregon just makes that one big play late in this football game, goes up by 10, and Indiana just kind of forcing it at the end. So I'm going to take Oregon to win that one. I'm going to take Alabama to edge out Missouri at the very end of that game. I think it's going to be an incredible duo. There's no doubt about that. I think these are 2 games to start your Saturday that are going to be really, really fun. And then it kind of makes way for a Saturday night that might be a little bit more quiet, but has enough of those upset potential that it's going to get a little bit weird. I can almost promise you that. But let's go ahead and take a break here. When we come back, we got a couple of conference matchups. We got Ohio State, Illinois, the Red River Shootout. We got Georgia, Auburn, a number of big-time games that we'll pick right after this, so stick with us.